Just want to remind you of that for those who aren't with us. All of these sessions are online thanks to Stephen and our little app and all of that. But he said these 5 things. He said, 1, there is no record that George Washington ever attended church, and I spoke about that and showed you 3 different churches that he attended, 1 5 blocks away. While the NPS guide physically hunched over, he mimicked and mocked one carrying, swinging a Bible person. And he said, even if I said the founders were Christians, how could we really know? Just because people carry a big old Bible in their hand, they can still be atheists. That was the other thing he said. I'll never forget, this was not done just in some university setting. This was in Independence Hall where they adopted the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, where the Congressional Congress met, all these decisions, George Washington, the rest of them. So this is an official guide. He said 3 more statements. Most of these men owned slaves. How could good Christians do that? I'll be talking about that. He said, we know that Benjamin Franklin was a deist. And I spoke last time about that, but I want to take that a little bit step further and tell you a little bit more about Benjamin Franklin. Last thing he says, we really don't know for sure about their religion. It's open for interpretation. You'll have to do your own study on that. Well, fortunate for him, I do my own study. So let me do this first. We're going to be seeing in Washington, D.C., the Bible Museum. How great is that going to be? Which is 8-9-story building, all put together. It was all donated money by the Green family. What company? Hobby Lobby. No, is that right? Hobby Lobby? Yeah. And so, I mean, amazing. So anyway, they have researchers and historians there. And here was just talking about a couple of the initial founders. One of the little 4 or 5 minute video that they were talking about, just 4 of the 5 of the obvious ones, and I'll give you references for more of them. But watch this, and then we'll come back to you.
What were the religious beliefs of the founding fathers of the United States? There's been a lot of controversy surrounding this subject, but there shouldn't be. Because of their prominence, I will discuss George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin, our nation's first 3 presidents, and the man referred to as the first American. All of whom, even if some did not individually adhere to Orthodox Christianity, were steeped in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Here's what we can say for certain about their religious beliefs. 1. All of the founders believed in a transcendent God, that is, a creator who exists outside of nature. 2. All the founders believed in a God who imposes moral obligations on human beings. 3. All the founders believed in a God who punishes bad behavior and rewards good behavior in an afterlife. The notion that any of the founders believed in an impersonal deity who merely created the universe and then left it to itself is false. All of them believed in a God who, as Franklin said at the Constitutional Convention, governs in the affairs of men. Let's start with George Washington. Washington's writings, both public and private, are full of references to the Bible. This is certainly true during his 8 years as the first president of the United States. Here is Washington at his first inaugural. The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. In all likelihood, Washington was an Orthodox Christian. Like Washington, Benjamin Franklin also referenced Bible verses, stories, and metaphors throughout his life. His calls for prayer at the Constitutional Convention were typical of his attitude. Franklin, who had his own unorthodox views, summed up his faith this way: that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this. While the religious views of Washington and Franklin are clear, those of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are more complicated. Adams referred to himself as a Christian throughout his life, but did not believe in traditional Christian doctrines such as the Trinity or the divinity of Jesus. Nonetheless, before, during, and after his tenure as president, Adams repeatedly asserted his admiration for the Christian faith. Those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God, he wrote. Likewise, Adams spoke of his great respect for the Bible. The Bible is the best book in the world. It contains more of my philosophy than all the libraries I have seen. Those who suggest that Adams was against religion like to quote from a letter he wrote to Thomas Jefferson, in which he said, "This would be the best of all possible worlds if there was no religion in it." Unfortunately, those who cite this line never quote the lines that immediately follow. But in this exclamation, I should have been as fanatical as the skeptics of religion. Without religion, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned in polite company. I mean hell. So, those who quote the first line without quoting the subsequent lines are either unaware of the full comment or are deliberately misleading people as to Adams's beliefs. Like Adams, Thomas Jefferson did not adhere to orthodox doctrine. Yet he often declared himself to be a Christian. I am a Christian, he said, in the only sense he, Jesus, wished anyone to be, sincerely attached to his doctrines. As one of the leaders of the American Revolution, his views are well known. After all, this is the man who wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't get a much more explicit statement of belief than that. These four founders, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin, were practical men with a sober view of human nature. They understood that man is morally weak and that religion provides the best encouragement and incentive to be good. It does so, first and foremost, by teaching that choices have consequences, not necessarily in the here and now, but most certainly in the hereafter, meted out by a just God. It should come as no surprise, then, that Jefferson, in his second inaugural, asked for the favor of that being in whose hands we are, who led our forefathers, as Israel of old, from their native land. So what were the religious beliefs of the founders? They were diverse, but all of them were rooted in the Judeo-Christian values found in the Bible. I'm Joshua Charles, writer and researcher at the Museum of the Bible for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here. To help keep our videos free, donate here.
I love these guys. That's going to be so exciting to see that Museum of the Bible. So as I mentioned to you last time, that skeptics today, liberals today, look back to our founders and at very best, they ascribe to them deism, which is the belief that God started the universe, he created it, but then he left go and he doesn't involve himself in the affairs of men. So what do you think when you watch some of that? Did you know that? Any surprises? I see some of you going, I didn't know that. Any surprises there? Any questions about what stood out in that little 5-minute thing? No questions. So let me talk about Benjamin Franklin. Last time I spoke about George Washington and just what a deep, profound faith that he had. And I quoted from Mount Vernon, his actual estate, and about his Christian involvement. And here's what I always say about when they say somebody's a deist. I only wish that we had Christians like their deist. That's what I think. Every time I study about them, I'm like, if that's all deism is, I go, we'll take a whole bunch of those. Because they were very active, they were very faithful to it. And Benjamin Franklin is normally the guy who is blasted among all of them of just being secular to the core. Because you know he all had mistresses and he, dabbled around. That's all you hear about. And listen, he had issues. None of these guys were perfect. But when it came to their faith, I just want you to know, he wrote at what time, and I'm going to quote from you from stuff, and it's stuff that I've researched. And first of all, two things. One, I owe many of you email, and I'm saying I apologize. I've been home about 3 hours all week. The other thing is I'm operating off about 3 hours sleep, so I am not responsible for anything I say today. Just letting you know that. You should actually right at the bottom of it. So here's what I want to just talk about Benjamin Franklin for a second. Again, think about what a secularist he is. Okay, what we've been told or what you've heard about him. Here's what he was writing in a 1787 pamphlet to people in Europe about coming to the United States. So he's talking to immigrants telling them about the United States. And this is what he says. To this may be truly added that serious religion under its various denominations, not when you use the word, I'll remind you this again, that serious religion, oftentimes when they use the word religion, you can completely equate it with the word Christianity, because that's how they were using it. It wasn't like it's used today. Religion. Absolutely true. So he says that serious religion under its various denominations, which are all the denominations, right? Presbyterianism, Congregationalism, all of them that exist at the time, Quakers, is not only tolerated but respected and practiced. Remember, that wasn't done in Europe. That wasn't done in country to country over there. So they were starting this freedom thing. Now get this. He says, atheism is unknown there. I always love your hmms. Atheism is unknown there. Infidelity, rare and secret. That included his own. So that persons may live to a great age in the country without having their piety shocked by meeting with either an atheist or an infidel. In other words, there's good people that live in America. Hold on, he's not done. And the divine being seems to have manifested his approbation at the mutual forbearance and kindness with which the different sects, not S-E-X, but S-E-C-T-S, the different groups, treat each other by the remarkable prosperity that which he has been pleased to favor the whole country. Imagine, this was in a pamphlet talking to others about coming to our country. Would you ever see a politician say that today? You're not even going to confront an atheist or an infidel. Huh? We're loaded with them. Watch, it gets better. So, Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, let me give you a little snippet of his history real quick. Oh, do I have time for this? No. This comes from one historian called The Lives of the Signers of the Declaration of Independence. Very, very scholarly work, and I just want to read toward the end of it. You know, his parents brought him up to be a minister of the gospel. That's why they brought him up to be that. And they began to educate him with that view, and I'm quoting from the work. He was kept at a common school for a few years and then taken into service of his brother. Hold on. In that city, he could not obtain employment. He proceeded on foot to Philadelphia, where he arrived on a Sabbath morning. With his spare clothing in his pocket and a loaf of bread under each arm, he wandered until he came to a Quaker meeting, where he entered, sat down, went to sleep. See, they slept in church services there too. And slept soundly until worship was closed. He was then awakened by one of the congregation and sought some other place of rest. I just love that little part. I always like to read it. So, do you know what the first seal of the United States was? When you think about two guys, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's known as the great separatist, right? The guy who says there's got to be a total separation between state and church. They can't mingle whatsoever, right? Right? That's the pitch. And we're led to believe that they just completely did with what we did today. I want you to see a picture on the screen of the seal that Thomas Jefferson proposed to be a seal for the United States. It's an image reflecting, quote, the children of Israel in the wilderness this is the second one. This was, let me tell you, this is Thomas Jefferson's, what I'm telling you, and this will be Benjamin Franklin's to following. So Thomas Jefferson's said he first recommended an image reflecting, quote, the children of Israel in the wilderness, led by a cloud by day and the pillar by night. Can you believe that? Thomas Jefferson. That's what he did. Oh my goodness, you can't do that. He later accepted Benjamin Franklin's suggestion to adapt the Old Testament account of God's parting of the Red Sea. That's this image on the screen. Do these symbols seem like they come from those who didn't associate the Creator with the God of the Bible? We're talking about a benevolent being, the great being, like he's some generic thing, and they keep turning over to Scripture. Would anybody tolerate this phrase? Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. That was Benjamin Franklin's recommendation. Tom, yeah, anybody all in favor? A million liberals I've showed this to. And here's their response. Oh, wow. I'd never seen that before. Not one of them has ever said, oh yeah, I knew all about that. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. All I want to point out, now, they didn't win, but this is what they proposed at the time. And I just want it to settle in. I'm like, they knew exactly what they're doing. And the God that they believed in, they kept associating to Scripture. The next phrase is actually where the writing of Benjamin Franklin, where he's actually writing about it. You can see the word Moses in there, actually coming from his hand itself. So Benjamin Franklin went to church down there in Philadelphia like this. In 1777, he was part of the Continental Congress, was a member of which they voted to import 20,000 copies of the Bible for the people of the new nation. Used government money to get it, 20,000 from Holland and Scotland and elsewhere to bring over to the United States. Can you see our Washington, D.C. buying some Bibles? What do you think would happen today if they bought 20,000 Bibles for the people of anywhere? What do you think would happen? Yeah, people would completely freak out. You know, one of my favorite responses is when you guys just start popping off. So, did he struggle with Orthodox Christian tenets? Absolutely. But I'm saying at the heart of these guys was a faith that carried on. He helped to raise money for church buildings in Philadelphia. And I just say again with Benjamin Franklin, if that's what a deist is, bring a bunch of them into our church because we need more of them. Amen? So I have to answer these phrases. I got 4 minutes left. When this guy said, most of these men own slaves, how could good Christians do that? We wonder that today. People here, all you hear is they all own slaves. They all owned them, and it was business. Who could do this? This guy, National Park Service, was teaching this in the Independence Hall. So here we are with all these people, and I kept thinking through my head, you want a great, great book? I'm trying to remember the author. It's called Vindicating Our Fathers. And it's written by a professor out of Texas. And he does a great job to say we are overlooking all these aspects of our founders. And one of the things he gets to is their views of slavery. So I'm just going to give you a couple quotes. Because when they created this line, do you have it up there? All men are created equal. Do you know they had in mind the freeing of slaves when they did this? They were talking all people. This is something they got from the Bible, that all people were created in the image of God. But they had in mind, somebody says, no, they didn't have the slaves in mind to be freed. I'm going, you listen how they talked about it. George Washington, these are quotes. There is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of slavery. Has anybody taught that in college? I didn't think so. John Adams, first president. Second president. You should have stopped me at that. You're like, wait a minute, who? That was a test. I can always hear Faye Allman laughing online. She's, I'm loving watching these shows. John Adams said, every measure of prudence, therefore, ought to be assumed for the eventual total obliteration of slavery from the United States. I have through my whole life held the practice of slavery in abhorrence. That was John Adams. Benjamin Franklin. Slavery is an atrocious debasement of human nature. This is Benjamin Franklin. Alexander Hamilton, right? Great guy, big brain, involved with our money system. He said the laws of certain states given an ownership in the service of Negroes as personal property, but being men by the laws of God and nature, they were capable of acquiring liberty. And when the captor in war, though fit to give them liberty, the gift was not only valid but irrevocable. In other words, we intended this for them too, and it's irrevocable. One more, James Madison. We have seen the mere distinction of color made in the most enlightened period of time a ground of the most oppressive dominion ever exercised by man over man. That's James Madison. He's the father of the Bill of Rights. So one more. Thomas Jefferson described it this way. Thomas Jefferson, I love the way he described slavery. He said, "We have the wolf by the tail." Isn't this and this is what he thought. We've got him by the tail. But that's as much as we're going to be able to do. Okay? I thought that was a perfect picture. We started this game. All men are created equal. We got him by the tail. Somebody else is going to finish this. And who finished it? Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, which we get to next time. I'm going to tell you a story of Valley Forge and George Washington and that kneeling thing, what actually happened in that. And Gettysburg, do you know there was a revival during the revivals all over North and South during the Civil War, in which tens of thousands of people, soldiers, became Christians. Did you learn about that? Dang, you never learned about any of this in school? Jones over here working for the college going, nope, it's not there. Anyway, I got to stop. I'm out of time. We'll pick up from that next time. Valley Forge and Gettysburg, and then we go into Washington, D.C., and I'll tell you about some perversions of the Christianity there.